Yo, what's up everybody? It's your boy Reggie here, back with you for another video. Now, holy, I'm excited to be here with you guys today. I really am, because I want to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart and something I have been passionate about when it comes to One Piece for years now. Now, as I'm sure you've seen from the title, you can guess what this video is about. And in this video, I want to have a discussion on why I feel like people underrate Sanji so much. So in one of my previous videos, which was top 5 Sanji moments, I had discussed that I feel like Sanji is an underrated Straw Hat member and people vastly underrate him in comparison to Zoro and Luffy. Every time a new One Piece chapter comes out and then Zoro or Luffy does some crazy shit and then people start talking wild crazy about Sanji in the One Piece community, me and Jeff get tight every time. It's like, yo, come on son, I know Zoro and Luffy did some dope shit, but y'all need to stop underrating Sanji. So in this video, I'm gonna talk about why people underrate Sanji, where did this narrative start to begin with, and then we're gonna talk about where does Sanji actually rank in comparison to Luffy and Zoro. But before we get into that, just make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this video, and finally, let's hop into it. So now that we're finally here, I feel like I gotta let y'all in on a little secret. Early on in One Piece in the East Blue Saga, when we got introduced to Sanji, I can't lie, Sanji was my favorite character in the group. Now, anybody who knows me knows that currently Zoro's my favorite character just because he's just goated to me. But before Zoro became my favorite character, it was Sanji. And the reason why I gotta say that is because for me, being a young kid watching One Piece for the first time, it was the first time I ever seen a character really solely just use kicks as their primary mode of fighting. So seeing that in the first time as a child, I thought that shit was so dope. Like someone just pulling up to you and giving you the hands with straight feet. The way Sanji was just so smooth in his suit, smoking his cigarette, and the way that he moved was so slick and just so athletic. I was like, yo, this dude is dope. This dude is dope. Ain't nobody could tell me that Sanji wasn't the coolest character at the time. But then after Sanji was introduced, he started to have this little brotherly rivalry with Zoro. Now this rivalry has been happening for so long, I doubt a lot of people even remember how it started. But basically the reason why the rivalry started, and if I really think about it, I don't even know if Oda really meant to do this, but the rivalry started when the Straw Hats were at Little Garden. Zoro and Sanji basically had this rivalry to see who could catch the biggest animal for food. And I think Oda was trying to juxtaposition this because Dory and Broggy basically had a battle where they were arguing essentially about the same thing, who could catch the biggest prey. So after the episode ended and then Zoro and Sanji pretty much came up in a tie, that's when the rivalry started, where they were just at each other's throat for the rest of the series. But at that moment in time, Oda didn't really establish yet the 1, 2, and 3 dynamic where Luffy fights the strongest villain, Zoro fights the second strongest, and then Sanji fights the third strongest. That dynamic wasn't really intact yet. That dynamic of the 1, 2, and 3 kind of started during the Alabasta arc. Now, when I say that, I'm sure a lot of you are probably confused because you would say, hey, Reggie, nah, that kind of started during the Arlong Park arc. And then that's where I would say you would be incorrect. So during the Arlong Park arc of the East Blue Saga, Luffy fought Arlong, Zoro fought Hachi, and Sanji fought Kurobi. Now, a lot of people actually make the mistake of thinking because Zoro fought Hachi, Hachi was the second strongest in the crew, but that's actually incorrect. That's actually one of the few times in the story story that Sanji actually fought the second strongest in the crew. That's right, the lieutenant of the Arlong Pirates was actually Kurobe. So this formulaic approach that Oda established, where Luffy fights the strongest character, Zoro fights the second strongest, Sanji fights the third strongest, it didn't really make an appearance until the Alabasta arc, and then it became somewhat solidified during the Enies Lobby arc. But at least for the Arlong Park arc, Sanji fought the second strongest guy. But because during Arlong Park we didn't really get an established who was stronger than whom, obviously other than Arlong, we weren't really able to establish who in the crew was the strongest in terms of rank. Obviously Usopp and Nami would be the lowest, but other than them, we couldn't really determine really how strong Zoro or Sanji were in comparison to each other. But then we get introduced to the Alabasta arc, and in the Alabasta arc we have a very clear hierarchy established, where Luffy fights Crocodile, Mr. Zero, Zoro fights Daz Bones, Mr. 1, and Sanji fights Bon Clay, Mr. 2. So what Oda did, and I'm not even sure if he really did it by purpose, he established a clear hierarchy in the crew, where because each of them beat the person that is in that organization very clearly, Mr. 1 is stronger than Mr. 2, and Mr. 0 is stronger than Mr. 1, because all of them pretty much fought all of their bad guys to essentially near death, it was very clear to establish Luffy the strongest, Zoro the second strongest, Sanji the third strongest. Now, even though in Alabasta this kind of power hierarchy was established, it didn't become solidified until the Enies Lobby arc. And honestly, when I really think about it, if I'm really gonna say who I'm mad at during this entire situation, it's this little zipper face beach ball right here, Fukuru. Because of this guy, and because of Oda himself too, I gotta give him some blame, they established this little power scaling, this random power scaling that was only used once and never again called Dorkies. Now, simply to remind you of this, just in case you forget, let me remind you what a Dorky is. Essentially what happened is that Fukuru was trying to establish the power levels of all the CP9 members currently at the time. So he said, hey, why don't all of you guys hit me as hard as you can, and based off that, I will be able to establish what's the power level or the power ranking of all of the CP9 members. So just to put this in context, your average Marine soldier has about 10 Dorkies. Now, mind you, a Dorky is just simply a strength level system. It doesn't account for powers and abilities. It doesn't account for techniques. It's just pure strength. And with this arbitrary system that Oda seemed to just pull out of his ass, he ranked Lucci with 4,000 Dorkies, Kaku with 2,200 Dorkies, and then Jabra with 2,180. So mind you, for a second time, what Oda did is that he put a very clear power ranking system when it came to the bad guys. Lucci the strongest, Kaku the second strongest, and then Jabra the third strongest. So after the end of Enies Lobby, when all of our guys beat all of their respective bad guys, it was pretty much solidified in the One Piece community that Luffy's the strongest, Zoro's the second strongest, and then Sanji's the third strongest. Even though the Dorkies have been stated to say that it is power only, and even with that, Kaku was only 20 Dorkies stronger than Jabra. So essentially, if regular Marine is 10 Dorkies in terms of power level, it's literally just Jabra and then 2 random Marines. But even with this, people seem to underestimate Sanji so much, where they're just like, oh, the same opponents that Zoro has defeated so far, Sanji would have no hope in defeating, when that's just not true. Now let me be clear, Zoro is my favorite Strong Hat. I do think Zoro is stronger than Sanji, but with that being said, I don't like how people underestimate Sanji to make it seem like he's just so much weaker than Zoro. Zoro has fought and defeated some pretty strong people, don't get me wrong, but I feel like we underestimate all the people that Sanji has fought against as well. Sanji fought against a CP9 member Kefla and a CP9 member Jabra. He fought against Virgo. He had a short fight against Doflamingo. He had an amazing fight against Page 1 and a fight against Drake. And then very recently, he had a fight against Queen, probably his best fight to date. And speaking of Queen, if we want to use this as an example of how people, I feel like, underestimate Sanji in comparison to Zoro, let's take a look at King and Queen of the Beast Pirates. So Kaido and the Beast Pirates, up to this level of the story, is by far the strongest crew that the Straw Hats have ever fought against. You have 100 Beast Kaido, who can turn into a blue dragon and is just a monstrous beast himself. That is a separate video on its own that I need to get into. Then you have King, the pyro manipulating pterodon who's going extinct when it comes in terms of his race, the Lunarians. And then you have Queen. Queen the Plague is an ancient zone, one of the strongest classifications of zones there are, a half cyborg, and also has incredible scientific knowledge, who used to work under Vegapunk himself. All three of these guys are beasts all of their own with billion-dollar bounties or more. So with that, let's talk about their bounties, especially when it comes to King and Queen. King has a bounty of 1.39 billion berries, while Queen has a bounty of 1.32 billion berries. Now, as everybody knows, your bounty is just a relative gauge on how dangerous the Marines consider you to be. Now, granted, the Marines don't know that King's a Lunarian. Because of the outfit that he wears to hide his identity, if the Marines knew that he was a Lunarian, that would probably mean that his bounty would probably increase. But in my opinion, that means we have an even better gauge of King's strength, because they're not basing it off the fact that he's some super rare specimen, a part of some super rare race. They're just gauging him on his threat level. So by the level of their bounties, their threat level is relatively the same. So I really think this battle that Zoro and Sanji both fought against two of the strongest people we've been introduced to at this point of the story really gives us a relative gauge on how strong they are in comparison to each other. So let's keep this all the way a buck. I'm being serious. Let's keep it all the way funky 1000. I know Zoro was injured because he took the full force blast from two Yonkos all by himself, but when Zoro was fighting King, he struggled against King. There was multiple times where King was giving him the business, and I wasn't really sure if Zoro was gonna make it out of it alive. And honestly, he kind of almost didn't, since he saw the Reaper of Death himself. Now again, I have to give a caveat. Zoro was fighting against two Yonkos and then took double hits from both of them all by himself. Zoro did a lot, but let's not act like Sanji didn't do his fair share as well. My man Sanji was running around the battlefield, helping out wherever he can, and at multiple times during the battle, he was holding off King and Queen at the same time solo. So we gotta give Sanji some credit with that. He was taking on two headliners, the second and third strongest of the Beast Pirates, which is arguably one of the strongest Yonko crews to ever be in existence. He was taking on both of them solo, keeping them both busy, while the rest of the Ninja Pirate Mink Alliance was handling the rest of Kaido's foot soldiers. Now again, I feel like I have to reiterate this. I do think Zoro overall is stronger than Sanji, but I'm a part of that group of people who never really thought it was by that much. And if you are one of those people who did think Zoro was just leaps and bounds stronger than Sanji, you can't think about that now, because during the battle when Sanji and Zoro were able to separate King and Queen, and then Sanji was fighting Queen on his own, Sanji's body started to become awakened. Sanji said himself, ever since he was using the raid suit, his body felt weird. Now what happened was, because of the continued use of the raid suit, Sanji's body started to awaken, where he started to awaken to his latent abilities. Sanji's body literally started to evolve mid-battle, where his exoskeleton started to cover itself. So at this point, Sanji and Zoro, in my opinion, are probably the closest in terms of strength than they've ever been before. My man Sanji took a full force swing sword from a lead headliner from the Kaido of the Beast crew straight to the jaw, and all he said was, "Ow, that hurt." Because of these enhancements, Sanji's durability, strength, and speed started to grow exponentially. Now let's be clear, Sanji did also struggle against Queen, but I have to put a caveat towards that because he was also going through a mental breakdown during the time. Because of the continued use of the raid suit, Sanji thought he was going to turn into a heartless android just like his brothers, and he was afraid that if he used the raid suit again, that it would be permanent. So Sanji destroyed the raid suit and was in constant fear of using his own power because he didn't want to turn out just like his family. Even to such a degree that he tells Zoro, calls him on a Den Mushi and says, "Hey Zoro, if I start to act strange, if I start to become heartless, please kill me." Once Sanji accepted his fate and accepted the fact that he had to become a heartless monster to be able to defeat Queen, and then even knowing that it's Sanji, he's not going to turn into a heartless monster, but regardless of the fact, once he started to accept his power, he damn near one-shotted Queen. Sanji's durability went to an extreme level. Sanji's speed went to the max. Sanji was moving so fast that Queen thought he turned invisible. And because of Sanji's new body, he was able to increase the heat of his Diambo Jambe and then turn it into Infrared Jambe. It turned from an orange fire to a blue super hot fire. So if we're comparing Zoro and Sanji's fight versus King and Queen respectively, Zoro, who struggled against King, Sanji struggled against Queen, but only because he was going through a mental breakdown at the time. And with King and Queen's relative power level being relatively the same, I feel like I can say with certainty that at this moment during One Piece, Zoro and Sanji are probably closer than they have ever been in terms of power level. And I don't think that we're that far apart to begin with. So honestly, my entire goal with this video is just this. I feel like we don't give Sanji enough credit. I feel like because Zoro admittedly has more hype and more beast moments in the story than Sanji, people downplay Sanji like he's not as strong as he is. Like he isn't one of the strongest people in all of One Piece. And to me, that's just not the case. I wanted to have this video to show Sanji deserves way more love than we give him, and honestly show that him and Zoro are comparable to each other. He's a little bit weaker than Zoro at worst, and even with Zoro at best. But let me know how you feel. Comment below and let me know. Do you think Zoro's stronger than Sanji? Do you think Sanji's stronger than Zoro? And if you do think one is stronger than the other, tell me why you think so. I really want to know from you guys. If you think Zoro is leaps and bounds stronger than Sanji, please tell me why. But with that, I got nothing left for this video. So, peace.